This morning I'm going to be talking about culture and the New Age. I thought it would be nice to start with just a bit of a definition on the term New Age because it's bantied about in various communities in ways that it's kind of just miraculous and not scientific. But I'm also going to talk about various approaches to understanding what culture is. And what I'm hoping to do is to start with the outer mundane understanding of culture, because that's a good place to start. And interestingly enough, so many people don't even understand, the mundane aspect of what culture is. So we're going to start there and then go from the more mundane into the spiritual, gradiently from let's say the personality to the soul to the monadic level of culture. So my hope is by the end of today's talk, you're going to have a much broader understanding of the term culture. So let's start with New Age. The New Age is determined by the precession of the equinoxes, which means when the sun enters into a new constellation. This is called the precession of the equinoxes, and this determines what sign the sun happens to be in. So as such, each time the sun enters into a new constellation, there's a new age. The sun now, we know, is moving from Pisces into Aquarius. And this is part of the controversy, well, where? What part? No one knows for sure, but the way we can determine it is by the consciousness of humanity, the culture of humanity. Astrologers believe that we have now moved away from the cusp. The cusp is usually anywhere from 5 to 10 degrees of the sign, and that we've moved right into the actual energy of the sign of Aquarius. The teaching tells us it's not even so much the position of the sun as it's moving through the cusp and into Aquarius, but it's determined by the consciousness of humanity. So is humanity being receptive to the new energy pulsing from Aquarius through the sun to humanity, or are they still, embedded in the Piscean age consciousness? So we can determine just through observation, whether the consciousness, whether the culture of humanity is changing. What was interesting to me this morning when I was driving over here, I oftentimes like to listen to TED Talks on Sirius XM. And this morning, some fellow was talking about consciousness. He ended his talk on consciousness by saying nobody knows what consciousness is. How could you spend all this time talking about it? I know, it was ironic. Usually TED Talks are not quite so, I won't say the word anyway. But he said that computers have consciousness, and I know and that we're going to have to learn how to turn a computer on and off, the consciousness of a computer on and off. Oh my, we have a long way to go. In the teaching, we are so, it makes me more grateful than ever for what we have to explore and to research and to study and try to understand in the teachings. Because the teachings, like Torquem Saradarian has written several books on consciousness, very, very, very detailed, very scientific, the whole subject of consciousness. And for esoteric students, we've moved beyond an understanding of consciousness to now we're trying to understand what super consciousness is. We know that there's a difference between the unconscious, little u, and the unconscious, capital U. So, for example, the unconsciousness with the little u means a person is not awake. They're just totally unconscious of what's going on around and about them. But the capital U unconsciousness means the future. It is our consciousness has not expanded enough yet, not increased in light enough yet, to where we can perceive or be perceptive of higher energy, greater spheres of light and love and power. And so that level is called unconscious with a capital U. So it's someday I'm going to give a series of talks on consciousness, not for us, but for YouTube. And maybe that fellow that gave us TED Talks will learn that a computer, according to our understanding of consciousness, is definitely not conscious. It does not have consciousness. So, okay. Some of us want to do more than to simply, passively experience this new age. We want to shape it. We want to share the culture of what the potential of a new age can be. We want to play an active role in building and shaping the culture of the new age. It truly presents us with an incredible opportunity if we would just recognize it. So if we take this in mind, that we have the ability, some of us have the ability, the desire, the dedication to begin to shape the culture of the new age, this would suggest that many of us were born at this time to implement such new ideas, new thoughts, to create a new education, to create a new psychology, to advance science, even to advance politics and the economy into a new culture, a higher culture. And we would call this the culture of the new age. We could also say it's the culture of the new era, the culture of the new epoch. You know, new age, new epoch, new era all mean primarily the same thing. So I do believe, and I see it with what we would call aspirants and disciples all over the world today, whether they are conscious or unconscious of being an aspirant or a disciple, they are trying to shape a new culture. Okay, so let me first define culture according to popular understanding. Culture is a word for the way of life of groups of people. This is just a basic outer popular understanding of culture. Different groups may have different cultures. A culture is passed on to the next generation of learning. Again, this is not the spiritual understanding of culture. This is a popular understanding of culture. Different groups may have different cultures. A culture is passed on to the next generation by learning, whereas genetics are passed on by heredity. Culture is seen in people's writing. Have you ever observed this when you're reading a book or you're reading somebody's notes or that you're even listening to TED Talks, which is normally a wonderful, wonderful resource, you know, educational resource. Writing, religion, music, clothes, cooking can be seen, you know, in people's activities and what they do. The word culture is most commonly used in this way. The excellence of taste in the fine arts, in humanities. If you have an excellence of taste, if you have a refinement of consciousness with the fine arts and humanities, this is known as a high culture. Again, I'm just speaking from the popular sense. You know that some people have a disdain for classical music. They would be considered uncultured. A person who loves the fine arts, who loves the humanities, would be one that is highly cultured. They have an excellence of taste. An integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior is a culture. The integrated pattern of human knowledge, belief, and behavior. The outlook, the attitudes, values, morals, goals, customs shared by society creates a culture. Most broadly, culture includes all human phenomena, which is not purely results of human genetics. But you see, geneticists will believe this, that it is genetics that determines culture. That is a popular understanding in today's society. Even the study of anthropology results in defining and determining culture. Isn't that interesting? So, now let's define culture from the perspective of the teaching. I hope, if for nothing more this morning, with our conversation about consciousness and the various levels of consciousness and culture and the difference between the popular modern societal understanding of culture to what the teaching is showing us and telling us about culture, is going to create an attitude or change your understanding of how incredibly beautiful and practical the teaching is. And the reason I bring this up is because I so oftentimes hear, oh, I can't tell my family about the teaching. Say, well, what are you trying to tell them? It's like, I'll never forget this student many, many moons ago came in for an appointment, and we had this wonderful chat, and he was just in a state of crisis, and I said, well, what's going on? He said, my family is not accepting of you and not accepting of the teaching, and I don't know what to do about it. I said, well, what are you telling them? He said, well, I told them you're from Sirius. Oh. Well, let's talk about that. His poor family, they must have thought he was in some really goofy kind of cult. You know, that we're all from Sirius. It's so crazy. But this has nothing to do, you know, with that kind of thinking. And if you're telling your family things that, you know, like this dear naive young man did, it's like, wait a minute, what does Sirius and so many other things which I don't want to get into this morning, it has nothing to do with the teaching. It doesn't have to do with today's spiritual life. It's not preparing us for the future. You know, it's not showing us about the purpose of life, and the teaching is everything about the purpose of life. It's more advanced than what the majority of humanity understands that the purpose of life is and what the future is going to be like for us. So, this is just a real basic statement that culture comes from the root colere, C-O-L-E-R-E, the Latin root colere, which means to inhabit or to cultivate. That's one definition, which I really don't care to even share, but somebody might be interested. I'm not a Latin scholar. My son was actually. My oldest son was a Latin scholar, interestingly enough, and I always thought it was so strange because he's not Catholic. And you know, if you're Catholic, then to be a Latin scholar is really great, but he was never Catholic. So anyway, I'm rambling. So, that's okay. So we understand through the teaching that culture is related to beauty. So remember this, put it in your brain, put it in your consciousness that culture is related to beauty. The more beauty that you feel, the more beauty you are surrounded with, the more beauty you recognize, the more refined is your own consciousness, because beauty is the process of refining one's consciousness. As we come in, those of us that are dedicated and believe that we can shape this new age, the culture of the new age, means that we are going to bring beauty into our thinking, into our actions, into our writing, into our relationships. And that our writing, our lecturing, our poetry, our compositions, our relationships are going to be increasingly filled with the refinement of beauty. So culture is related to beauty. Culture is the translation and interpretation of beauty. When you have culture, you have a bridge extending from the source of beauty to yourself. Culture is the revelation, the expression, and the manifestation of a hidden beauty. Just think of it. We have hidden beauty within ourselves. It is the expression and the manifestation of the hidden beauty concealed within us, within you, within me, within everyone. This beauty was initially an outpouring expressed through personality culture. So if you have an interest in this, you can go back in history. You can go to Wikipedia, which is a great resource of study, and you can read and recognize and begin to understand how beauty was initially the outpouring expression of the personality. Personality culture. Why was this important? Because such a culture created the opportunity to integrate the personality, to integrate the physical, emotional, mental, physical activity, emotional feelings, and mental thoughts, to integrate our activity, our feelings, and our thoughts was initially the way we were able to integrate our personality. Isn't that interesting? And this is all what the teaching is educating us with about culture. The culture of humanity is a form of all those great aspirations which have been expressed in the human heart and soul throughout centuries. These forms of great aspiration produced what? They did produce something. New civilizations. New civilizations. New eras. New ages. Culture. In ancient times, these aspirations and urges were given to humanity by wise men and women who knew how to direct human emotions and thoughts through prayer, through invocation, and even through parables and proverbs. But if you've done any research of this term, you have by now, certainly this morning, learned there are many definitions and understanding of culture. I found it interesting to learn that there are actually culture theorists. Culture theorists who have tried to bend the definition to the bias of their personality. Computers have consciousness. But if the source is the teaching, we begin to learn now the spiritual definition of culture. Nicholas Rourke wrote that in his search to understand the term culture, he found a book called Encyclopedia of Ethics. I did a research on internet research and found the title. I didn't find the book, but the title is there, which means the book is there somewhere. I just did it too late last night, and I thought, oh, this is very interesting. So you might have time sometime this week. Encyclopedia of Ethics. That's the book that Nicholas Rourke found. And in that book, he read this. To Bacon, the world is indebted to the term culture, and also to philosophy. There's also a book called the Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So the two may be the one and the same that Nicholas Rourke, read and was referencing. But in the end, Rourke felt this. He said that while of itself, and this is a quote, while of itself the notion of culture may be broad enough to express all forms of spiritual life in man, including intellectual, religious, and ethical, it is best understood intensively as humanity's effort to assert its inner and independent being. So that's his conclusion. Culture is best understood as humanity's efforts to assert its inner and independent being. Nicholas Rourke defined culture in this manner. He says, culture is a reverence of light. So we can make notations of this, and they can be seed thoughts for us. Reverence of light, what does that mean to us? Reverence of truth, reverence for the teaching, reverence for one's soul, reverence for beauty, because all of these aspects of life reflects beauty. Light then reflects beauty. Darkness has no reflection, only light. So, he says culture is the reference for light. When somebody comes to you and they're negative and they're ugly and they swear and they treat you with disdain and disrespect, there is no reverence of light in them. And we need to see this happening in humanity today, in society today. There is a lack of reverence for light. Culture is reverence of light. So this tells us what? Culture is diminishing. More important than ever that people like ourselves get out there in the trenches and begin to shape a higher culture. Culture is love of humanity. It's not so easy today to love humanity. Why? Because we are so bombarded with anti-culturists. Our challenge is to put our concentration in such a refined state of consciousness that all we can do is love humanity. He said culture is fragrance, the unity of life and beauty. Culture is fragrance. It is unity of life and beauty. The unity of life and beauty, it is fragrance. When life and beauty come together, it emits this union, emits a fragrance that is so magnificent that it is hard to define, because it's a smell, and it's hard to define a smell, and it's a sense. He said that culture is a synthesis of uplifting and sensitive attainments. So we could understand this as how in this way. We have a team of people working with, and you'll hear me talk about this over the next 10 years, because it's going to take us that long. We are working together now. There's 5 or 6 of us that are working together from different cultures, different languages, different nations, different countries, different time zones. We're all working together to translate and edit the notebooks of Helena Rourke. And as we are engaged in this very tedious work, we're learning about the attainments of the Rourkes, their entire family, the original members that became and organized the Agni Yoga Society. These are the people behind the founders, or they were the founders of the Agni Yoga Society and the teaching of living ethics. So as we are tediously immersed in their life and their work and trying to present it to the world in the most beautiful way, we are being uplifted, and we're learning about the synthesis of how they work together, about the synthesis of their life. It's quite amazing. So this is culture. Culture is the synthesis of uplifting and sensitive attainments. So we're being affected by their culture. This is an interesting statement. Culture is the motivating power behind everything. Culture is the motivating power behind everything. So we have to check our motivations behind our decisions, behind our relationships, behind our words, behind our thoughts. If culture is the motivating power, what culture are we presenting? Is it the culture of our personality? Is it the culture of our soul? Is it the culture of our greater selves? And then finally, he says, culture is the heart. And we know in the book that we published many, many years ago, called Spiritual Regeneration, that some people have dead hearts. No culture. Culture is the heart. Nicholas Rourke said, if we gather all the definitions of culture, we find the synthesis of active bliss. I remember last Sunday I talked about bliss, okay. The altar of enlightenment and constructive beauty. He wrote, the tree of culture is nourished by all unlimited knowledge. Unlimited knowledge. It is nourished by all unlimited knowledge, by enlightened labor, incessant creativeness, and noble attainments. He said this is the tree of culture. So, At this point, and in summary, culture may be broad enough to express all forms of spiritual life in mankind, intellectual, religious, and ethical. It is best understood as humanity's effort to assert its inner and independent being. That's the key for us to understand. Humanity's effort to assert its inner and independent being. If we take that one condensed definition of culture, we can then see a more detailed understanding of how humanity expresses culture at the personality level, at the soul level, at the spiritual level, or at the level of the central fire within man and the universe. So 4 different levels of culture according to the teaching. Personality culture, soul culture. When we talk about living or spiritual culture, which is a 3rd level, it's called, the teaching is telling us this is the culture of the future. That living culture is the culture of the future. Spiritual culture is the culture of the future. And then the 4th level, the central fire, the culture of the central fire within ourselves, and within the universe. So we can see how a computer does not have a consciousness. Okay, so I'm going to be thinking about this all day. Okay, personality culture is the expression of our physical, emotional, and lower mental levels of the personality. We know that some countries have a personality culture. They're not yet integrated. They're still battling with identity. And individuals are the same way. They have a personality culture. It can be easily recognized in our advertisements, in our movies, and in people's daily life. It is a revealing exercise to observe the values demonstrated or expressed through the media. For example, many people watch the Super Bowl. Right? Well, I watch the breaks, the halftime. Anyway, this is personality culture, and people are really moved by those commercials. There is also fashion, which shapes our culture today, and so forth. If you observe the personality culture and its values, we get a good grasp of that level of expressed culture in our own country and from around the world. So I've coined personality culture as pop culture. This is pop culture. Now, soul culture. We can observe this level of culture through the writings, and this is just some of my own examples, but you're going to have a lot more, I'm sure. We can observe soul culture through the writings of Tolstoy, Tagore, Emerson, the science of Einstein, the art of Michelangelo, the music of Samuel Barber, Beethoven, Handel, Bach, Tchaikovsky, and others. And I know not everybody would agree with me, but this is what I determined as soul culture. Spiritual culture, like I said, is the culture of the future. This culture is the expression. This is so beautiful, and this is where our focus should be as we're trying to shape and bring in the new age, the new era, the new epoch. Divinity, the expression of divinity from within mankind. That divinity is our potential. When we talk about the divinity of ourselves, the divinity of society, the divinity of humanity, That is our potential. Humanity's divine fire, spiritual culture, divine fire. Only rare people manifest this beauty, this potential. You can see the expression of culture in the works of, for example, Nicholas Roerch. This is not personality culture. It is not even soul culture. It can include it, but it's not exclusive to it. It is a culture which, when contacted, immediately releases to some degree our hidden divinity. And this is why we have these beautiful prints on our wall. Someday we're going to have an original and not a print, but even the prints are beautiful. It is a culture which, when contacted, immediate releases in some degree our hidden divinity. The culture of the spiritual fire within mankind and the universe manifests through the divine embodiments of avatars, such as Christ and Buddha. The culture of the central spiritual fire, messengers from God, few and far between. Divine embodiments called avatars, such as Christ and Buddha. The culture that we want to cultivate in the New Age, the Aquarian Age, is unity, harmony, cooperation. Unity, harmony, cooperation, and synthesis among all nations, races, and religions. And we're trying to do this today. It's been going on for at least 200 years. But that's during the cusp of the Aquarian Age. Now we have to get more serious. So the seeds were planted, now they're being nurtured, and we're trying to bring forth the fragrance, see, that were planted in these seeds within the last 200 years. Unity, harmony, cooperation. This is why the dark forces are out in full form in our personal life, our family life, our group life, our national life, fighting against the new culture. We want to create a culture of global love, compassion, cooperation, and a global outlook from within each human heart. Educators will revise their books and remove all those materials which foster separativeness, a sense of superiority, discrimination, hatred, and possessiveness. I was thinking the other day, I can't bring up the name because this is going on YouTube, but a student in the group wrote me a note and said, "Do you know about this guy? Well, this guy is very tall, he has dark hair, he's written many books, he's a very popular speaker, and his purpose is to increase people's ego. And his initials are AR." Okay, that's all I can say. And I was so shocked because all you have to do is to listen to one lecture or read one chapter written by this guy, and you know he's an egotist, and he's building egotism in the nature of the human being. That's old age. Egotism, sense of self-importance, superiority complex, it's all old age. The reason it was so important to have an ego, to have a sense of self-importance, to have this sense of superiority, was to recognize who the person was and what the potential was for that individual. See, that they're no longer an animal. So they're building a soul animal consciousness. That's the Piscean age. Now we're trying to express the divinity. And the divinity has nothing to do with egotism, because it's all separative. So we're trying to, as educators, we're trying to remove books that foster this sense of superiority and discrimination and hatred and possessiveness. That this is mine, you're mine, this country is mine. That's possessiveness. Educators will begin to educate the soul along with the personality, soul personality. We want the hearts of men and women and children to feel the unity of life, to teach the continuity of consciousness in order to discover the one self in humanity, to eliminate the use of alcohol and tobacco and narcotics. Philosophy and communication. This is another field. Philosophy and communication, to provide the techniques of intuitive thinking. Philosophers, communicators are now going to be building techniques, creating techniques to help others learn intuitive thinking, straight knowledge, pure reason, and synthesis. And this all started back in the mid-1800s, and now we should have cultivated at least a modicum of intuitive thinking, straight knowledge, pure reason, and synthesis. The science of impression and meditation, to eliminate gossip, negative criticism, and slander, as well as betrayal. Another field is the arts. Through the arts, to teach the mystery of creation, the mystery of cosmos, the solar system, and galaxies. It's like this, our conference in March, we're going to be showing a video on cosmos. This is art. To take people out of their homes and out of the trenches and look at cosmos and to recognize life in cosmos, the solar system, and galaxies. To create an art which will be the mirror of the future, to see the possibility of humanity's future achievements. And science, through science, to find ways to penetrate into the energies and forces and laws and principles of the cosmos. To penetrate into energies, forces, laws, and principles of the cosmos, and relate them to the need of humanity. See, this is tying, fusing, putting it together, not taking an idea over here that has nothing to do with there, or there and here and there. To create great institutions of research, of facts, of laws, and energies for only those scientists whose hearts are in the right places. To teach about the etheric body to the healers so they can heal a human being on all three levels, physical, emotional, and mental. There is already a group doing this in London. This London group is made of individuals all over the world. It is absolutely a profound group, and the leader is more profound than the membership of the group. It's extraordinary, the healing that they're doing, physical, emotional, and mental healing, distant healing. Religion, to create a religious culture that speaks to people about the glory hidden in the heart of man. The one brotherhood of humanity, of the one religion which everyone can understand according to the actualization of love. to create a cultural environment where disciples can be initiated into higher consciousness, expanding their awareness toward the mysteries of the universe. This is what we are trying to do and to build in this esoteric community. To teach about the hierarchy of light, to restore the mystery of all ages, to create a culture where no conflict exists between any religion, because the new religion reveals the essence and oneness of all religions. And economics, to create an economic culture where human beings learn to share consciously whatever they have in such a way there will be a great abundance on earth. And I see this happening. On the internet, they have GoFundMe. Some of the GoFundMe, projects are pretty lame, but there are others that they're collecting $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 for another person or another country, or like the animal kingdom. And they don't even have to, not even declaring it as a tax deduction. Where everyone has everything he needs, the new economics. What they need will be provided to them. Just imagine this. I think it's happening. It's not easy to see in third world countries, but these are seeds that were planted in the last 200 years, and it takes time to nurture and to bring these seeds into bloom. Where no one will have a need to accumulate money. First of all, money has to be accumulated because of our fears. So we have to get rid of fears. Fearlessness. When we're fearless, we no longer have to hoard money. Think about this guy, Epstein. His millions and millions and millions of dollars, what he could have done with that money. Fortunately, we have people in the world today that are not like the Epsteins. Where no one will have a need to accumulate money because they have whatever they need. Greed will be annihilated. So the new age culture, I'm running over, but I'm not almost done. Well, I'm going to finish this because it's important. The New Age culture will soon see the door of the United Nations opened in such a way, I truly believe this, and I know many people don't, but I do. The New Age culture will see the door of the United Nations opened in such a way that the representatives of humanity will be overpowered with the spirit of unity, brotherhood, sharing, trust, and the spirit of the Most High. Okay, let me close with this about what cultured people, how we can recognize cultured people. A cultured person is one who has some level of contact with avatars, typically through their higher mind or intuitional level of consciousness. A cultured person is one who is at least able to appreciate the creativity of a talent, and who strives to express that creativity through all of their relationships. Cultured people are people who have a contact with their inner divinity to a certain degree. A cultured person is a person who has contact with their innermost self and is able to express that contact through living a creative life. So to become cultured means to us to live in the light of our soul, our higher self, and to become beautiful. If you are a cultured person, you are going to be a bridge that heals others, from chaos to beauty, from darkness to light. Culture is the result of a contact, this is really important, is the result of a contact with the fire within the universe. It is a service of beauty. It's like if you want to see beauty, go into our reading room this morning and see this beautiful tapestry. It's a Buddhist tapestry. We believe it is the wheel of karma. And it represents the Kalachakra teaching. Someone put this in a frame with glass because it's a couple of 100 years old. It's so beautiful. It is a service of beauty. Culture refines consciousness and makes us more sensitive to the pulse of the cosmic magnet, the cosmic heart. Through culture, we come closer to each other. Through culture, the boundaries of races, colors, countries, and religions are eliminated. And let me end with this. Culture provides the only language through which races can communicate with each other and allow people to understand each other. You know, it's my Sunday morning experience to watch Fareed Zakaria. I'm finally getting to know how to pronounce his name. I had to turn it off this morning because he was talking about white supremacy. And that culture, it was so horrible, it was so dark, so ugly, that I can't start my day like this. But it's out there, and he's educating people, and it hurt my heart. I couldn't listen to it anymore or watch it. But culture, let me end again with this, provides the only language through which races can communicate with each other and allow people to understand each other. That's culture. Okay, I hope you took good notes and really think more about culture in the New Age and our part to play in it.